It off to Dr. Fierstein.
Thank you. So, positive deviant teams, right, are positioned for robust and sustainable success. And today I want to share with you a framework for forging that kind of an extraordinary team. And those of you who know me know I have to start with a story. So I'm going to start with a story of an organization that thought it had figured out the formula for this kind of success. And I'll share with you how they got it so wrong and what we can learn from that. So the slide should be a hint as to what kind of a story this is going to be. It has to do with Olympics. And in 1989, the International Olympic Committee changed one rule that was going to lead to a cascade of events that bring us to sitting here today. That rule change was that NBA players, professional players, would be allowed to participate on the basketball teams. And so when the United States heard professional athletes can participate on these basketball teams in the Olympics, they thought, we have the gold medal for the rest of our lives, for the rest of eternity. All we have to do is recruit the cream of the crop of the NBA players, send them off to the Olympics, gold is ours, we don't have to give it another thought. Which means that their underlying formula for success is recruit skill and talent, get the best people possible, and then success is a sure thing. The first test of this rule was in 1992. And they recruited people like Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, Larry Bird. Even if you don't watch basketball, you've heard these names. That team is considered actually to be the finest collection of athletes ever to play together. They were dubbed the Dream Team. You might remember that people were talking about it. It was going to be astonishing. So they just show up at the Olympics, barely practice with each other. I mean, they're just so good. What do they need to practice? And because actually they have more experience competing against each other, these guys. So they had a few scrimmages and the games start. And it ended up not being a competition. It was more like a massacre. They won every game they played by an average of 40 points. They never called for a timeout. They just bulldozed through the competition. And what was the competition doing? Pretty much nothing. They were more interested in getting their picture taken with Michael Jordan and getting the signature and the autograph of people like Magic Johnson than trying to compete because they thought that competing was useless anyway. So yes, they came home with the gold medal. Everybody's proud. This is the formula for success. It was put into play 4 years later. If it worked in 92, let's try it again in 96. Great NBA players are recruited. They just show up to the Olympics. And yes, they come home with the gold medal. Hey, this works. So that was 92. We did it in 96. Then came the year 2000. Bingo, 3 times in a row. They go off, they come back with a gold medal. We now have 3 Olympic Games showing us that the formula works. What nobody's paying attention to, what nobody's noticing, is that the margins of victory are shrinking. So if the Dream Team in 92 is winning by 40 points per game, 4 years later, it's 30 points per game. And by the year 2000, it's only 20 points per game, but still it's winning and 20 points is respectable, so nobody's questioning it. So 4 years later, they put this into play again. It is now 2004. And who's on that team? We've got LeBron James at the height of his career. We have Carmelo Anthony, height of his career. Dwayne Wade, people whose name you even know today. And what happened to the team in 2004? This team is not remembered for the gold medal because they didn't win the gold medal. They didn't even win silver. They barely squeaked by with the bronze medal. Barely. They won by 2 points. Only the bronze medal. And if you look at their reaction to winning the bronze medal, you can see they're not too happy about it, right? They are so humiliated. How could this have happened to such stellar athletes? And so the country's in shock. This is just so humiliating, and the players are in shock. The U.S. organizing committee really is baffled. They can't figure out what went wrong. Skill and talent was not an issue. They'd hired the best. So they decide they need a pair of outside eyes to try to figure out, maybe somebody can figure out what went wrong. So they turn to a coach outside the NBA. Sometimes you need really an outside view. So they turned to Coach Mike Krzyzewski. He's affectionately known as Coach K. He's the coach of the Duke basketball team. And he agrees to look at all the tapes of these games to see if he can figure out what the problem was. And in reviewing the tapes, after really some very careful review, he comes back and he tells the organizers that he's identified 2 problems. And if we can't fix these 2 problems, the U.S. really doesn't have any chance of any kind of robust, sustainable success. And the 2 problems he identified are problems we can look at on our teams as well. And I want to share with you what I've taken away from what he identified, what he did, and how we can apply a new framework to thinking about team success. So he said, okay, problem number 1. Each one of these players, if you look at the slide, each one of these players is playing for the name on the back of the jersey, right? So Allen Iverson is playing for his own personal glory. Likewise, Dwayne Wade is playing for personal points and his reputation, and on it goes. So they're all playing for themselves. Each one of these guys has to start playing for the 3 letters on the front of the jersey. In short, what he's saying is their heart is in the wrong place. Their heart is all about themselves, and it's not about the values, something more meaningful. What does it mean to play for the USA? So that was number 1 problem. The heart's in the wrong place. Then he said the second problem is, you got great players. Dwayne Wade does a great job doing the Dwayne Wade game, and LeBron James plays the LeBron James game. It's like silos in an organization, each silo doing its own thing. Each player is doing his own thing. We don't have a system in place to create the head, the mind of Team USA. So we need 2 things. We need to figure out how to put their heart in the right place, and then we have to figure out how to create a mindset that is Team USA, the head, the system for the team. And Coach K agreed to take on the coaching responsibility for the next Olympic Games, for the 2008 Games. And he began working with the players early in 2005, and for those next few summers, they'd be working together to get to 2008. And so he started by, what does it mean to engage the heart? And I want to share with you what he did with those athletes, big egos. How did he engage their heart differently so it wouldn't just be about each one playing for personal reputation? During the first summer they got together, they were going to go to New York for one of those interviews like on the Today Show, those early morning talk shows. So he took that as an opportunity, and he commissioned one of those boats to take them out to the Statue of Liberty. And he had all the players on the top outside deck, and he asked the boat to stop right in front of the Statue of Liberty. He took the players and he said, we're going to take a moment to reflect about what that statue means. And he said, every single one of you has an ancestor who came to this country. Some of them came with dreams. Some of them came under great duress, slaves. And he knew some of their stories. He told Dwayne Wade about his ancestor who'd come. He'd done his homework. He told LeBron James something about his ancestors. And he said, they came here and lived really difficult lives to make your life possible. You wouldn't be where you are today without them. So I want you to know the story of your ancestor. And when you get out on the basketball court and they play the national anthem, which they always do, we're all standing there, hand over heart. I want you to be thinking about that person who made your life possible. And when you get out on the court, you're there to play to thank them. That's why you're going to play, to thank them for making your life possible. And he had some of these guys really with tears in their eyes. It never had dawned on them about the history of their own families in that way. And Coach K didn't leave it at that. You can't just kind of try to engage the heart once. You got to do it in multiple ways. So a few weeks later, Coach K himself is a graduate of West Point. He has a lot of military buddies. And he asked one of his former classmates, who was a colonel in the Army, to bring some wounded warriors, wounded soldiers, to come to a practice. And these soldiers thought, this is really amazing, right? We get to come and rub shoulders with LeBron James. When they walked into the practice, it was almost surreal, because these wounded soldiers were looking at the athletes like they were the heroes in the room. And the athletes got really emotional, because these particular soldiers had all volunteered to go back to fight for the USA despite their injuries. And they explained to the athletes why. They explained what the values of the United States meant to them, what it meant to go abroad and represent the country. And they brought the players, they brought the athletes patches of the American flag. And they say, we have these patches on our uniforms when we go to serve abroad. And it would really honor us if you athletes would put these flags on your uniforms, because in a sense, you are also going outside the country to represent our values. Would you be willing to do that? And these guys just really got emotional. They were starting to talk to these guys, hugging, and Coach K knew he had won their hearts, that they were now playing for something other than personal glory. So a few sessions ago, we talked about grabbing the heart with the concept of purpose. And we need to scale up from what Coach K did with these basketball teams, is to think about what's the heart of our Logitech team? Why does our game matter, right? What does it matter? What you do. It's right. It's not about the what, it's why what you do matters. And it helps, of course, if it's compelling and meaningful, but that's where employee engagement comes from. That's where we grab people to bring their best self to work, where they actually care about what the work means. And just to remind you, because we talked about this more than 6 months ago, there are organizations that have a very good sense of why their work matters. And their customers become fans. Their customers will stand in line at 3 o'clock in the morning to buy the next version of a phone they already own, even if it's snowing. I mean, are these people crazy? They're not crazy. Companies like Apple create an emotional connection with their end users. And that's what purpose does. Purpose, again, it's not what you do, it's the value you create for your customers, for your end users. And so if you think about what some of those companies who are really good at creating fans, they focus on the customer. Their purpose statement is about the value that's created for the customer. Disney, for example. Disney, it's an entertainment company, but they say that their purpose is to create for you the most magical moments of your day. It's about you, it's the focus on you. Nike, it's a commodity company, really, it makes shoes. But that's not what they say their purpose is. Their co-founder, who was an Oregon coach, said, if you have a body, you're an athlete. I question that in myself, but if you have a body, you're an athlete, and our mission, our reason for being is to bring out the best in you as an athlete. So our products are designed for you in mind, to bring out the best in you as an athlete. Again, it's about you, not about us as a company. A lot of companies fall into a trap with the purpose statement. The trap they fall into is, we want to be the best blah blah in the world. We want to be the best computer company in the world. We want to be the best whatever company in the world, as opposed to being something like the best company for the world. What does it mean to be for rather than an inwardly focused statement? And so I like to contrast some companies that are in the same domain and look at their purpose statement. Bank of America, for a really long time, had a purpose statement to be the best financial institution in the world. That's boring, it's selfish, it's inwardly focused. Whereas HSBC, Global Bank, said, our purpose is to help people achieve their dreams and their hopes. Okay, that's different from being the best in the world. Help others achieve their dreams and their hopes. So I think I challenged you a few months ago to have a purpose conversation, to think about what is your purpose. And I'm just curious if any teams out there had the conversation. Did you have a conversation about what your purpose is? It's a really tough conversation to have, so people kind of shy away from it. It can get touchy-feely, another reason people will shy away from it. But I would encourage you, here's an easy way to have the conversation. Here's what we do, okay? We build these, right? We build these. Okay, why does that matter? Why does that matter? And if you ask why something matters a few times, you'll start to get more to the heart of why things, what your actual purpose is. What's the value you're creating for people? So you start with the what, that's fine. And if you just ask a few times, Toyota uses this method of the gaps analysis, they call it, of asking things 5 times. Why does it matter that we build these things? Why should customers care about this? And then why does that matter? And then why does that matter? You'll be better able to get to the heart of your purpose. So I'm going to leave that as one challenge for you. Logitech is having this birthday. What a wonderful opportunity to create a passionate purpose statement for the next 35 years. Now, Alibaba has, in China, they've said that their purpose is to live 102 years. They want to survive, as a company, 102 years. You don't survive 102 years if all you're working on is a product. You have to have a reason for being. So what is your purpose? Okay? Alibaba's purpose, as they say, is to making business easier for the small business, doing business with each other to make it easier for small businesses to do businesses with each other. That's different from being the best internet company in the world, okay? All right, so having the purpose conversation. Next, these people were not a team, right? They were just great stars coming to play in the Olympics. So beyond galvanizing the heart of the team, we also have the system in place. We need a system to create the mind of the team. And what I want to go through with you now is a framework for creating that system. And I've developed this framework by looking at what Coach K has done with all his teams, his Duke teams, the Olympic teams, as well as what I've now investigated in a lot of companies and teams I've worked with to see how they apply these ideas. So from all of my research, here's where we go. It is a 3-part system. Number 1, you have to create a collaborative mindset. Who are you as a team? You kind of know who you are as a person, but who are you as a team? The team has to have some kind of an identity. And what does it mean, for example, to be Team USA? What does that exactly mean? And what Coach K said is that to be a team, you have to have standards. And standards are principles that as a group, we want to agree, this is what we're going to aspire to be as a team. And so I'll just show you some examples of how he involved the team to come up with principles that they would like to expect of themselves and each other. So for example, no excuses. Well, what does that mean? No excuses means you can't blame the competitors, you can't blame the customers, you can't blame jet lag. Whatever your results are, you own, and there are no excuses. This is what the team did. Trust is big, right? We have to find ways to build trust, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. I'm fascinated with number 3. We look each other in the eye. Okay, he said, well, the team said, when we talk to each other, we look each other in the eye. And you can see how that's very culturally specific. Because in Asia, that would be a sign of disrespect in some cultures. So you can't impose standards on a team. The team has to come up with how we want to behave together. How do we want to engage with each other? We win together and lose together, right? It's not about individual glory. It's about how we give aid to a teammate, right? So if somebody's down, we don't step on them to go get the ball. First, we pick them up, then we go get the ball. I want to show you what the difference is between a standard and a rule. So if you see the one that says we're always on time, that's something we aspire to live up to be on time. A rule would be something like Coach K telling the players, you have to be in bed by 10 o'clock every night on the day before a game. Bedtime, lights out, 10 p.m. I really don't want to be the person to tell LeBron James he has to be in bed by 10 p.m. lights out. Because first of all, how am I going to enforce that? Secondly, rules are just made to be broken, aren't they? People think that they're humiliating, they're demeaning. I don't need to be in bed by 10 p.m. I'm an adult, you're going to tell me to be in bed by 10 p.m. So they're rigid, they're tactical, and they just really they're not effective because people will find ways to break them. Standards are more aspirational. They create expectations. We're always on time. If I'm LeBron James, I got to figure out what it's going to take for me to be on time. It might mean I have to be in bed at 8 p.m. to be on time, but that's my choice. That's already a decision as an adult I can make. So again, I think that the difference between a rule is that a rule is demeaning, whereas standards bring meaning. They create more of this sense of engagement with one another, of expectation, rather than as soon as they close their eyes, I'm not going to do that. Okay. Now, what's the beauty of standards? Okay, these are principles we're going to live up to, and the team can look at this and say, this is who we are. This is who we as a team are. And when the going gets tough, and it will, you're going to have setbacks, stuff will happen, the team doesn't disintegrate. We can pull these back out and remind ourselves, we don't just show up, that's how we show up. So standards help us even when the going gets tough. Now, there are two standards that Coach K asks his team to work on, whether he's coaching Duke teams over the decades or this Olympic team. There are two, we'll call them values, that he asks them to think about how they want to live up to. And the first one has to do with trust. You can't have a team mind, a team brain, without the trust of each other. What are you going to do? How are you going to demonstrate that we trust one another? And the issue with trust is that if it goes unsaid and we don't talk about it, you can intend to be trustworthy, but how do you know that's how you're coming off? Because people can't see your intent. They can only see your actions. And there was a dramatic instance at a renowned medical institution, a hospital, Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. A great story showing how inadvertently you can completely betray trust. And here's the story. One of the nurses was in the lounge area where they take their break, and she noticed on the clock that was on the wall a wire sticking out. And with security issues, wires that look suspicious, she decided to check it. And she discovered a hidden camera. So in the lounge area. So she alerted all the other nurses in their medical unit, and they went looking, and they found 16 hidden cameras in their entire unit. And so they're just absolutely livid, like, what's going on? And they rush down to the administrative offices to try and figure out who put those. And the administrators were caught off guard. And they kind of fumbled and they said, well, it's not what it looks like. No. Everybody knows there have been some thefts in our medical unit. In fact, in the hospital in general, there have been some thefts. And we're not accusing any of you, they say to the nurses. In fact, we haven't even deployed the cameras yet. We were going to tell you before we turned them on. Are the nurses buying that story? No, because the nurses have a different story, a story of betrayal. And I just want to step back a moment and ask, is it possible that these administrators, these leaders are telling the truth, that in fact, it was inadvertent, they were unaware that this could be perceived as violating trust? It's possible that they were acting a bit foolishly, but it doesn't matter. Because again, their intent can't be seen. Only their actions can be seen. And so you always want to be thinking, all right, what are the actions we as a team are going to take to demonstrate that I'm a trustworthy team member and I expect of you to do the same so that I can trust you? How do we build the trust? Critical question. So that should be part of your standards. And what Coach K says is, all right, tell us this, you guys figure out what standards would demonstrate that we are acting in a trustworthy manner with each other. What do we want to live up to? The second thing he asks them to talk about is respect. What demonstrates that we respect one another? And there are certain elements of that go into respect that every team needs to talk about. One of them has to do with listening to each other. In this world of incessant distraction, do we actually listen to one another? When people talk and we're having a meeting and people come up with ideas, do you feel open-minded to actually listening to those ideas where every voice gets a chance to be heard? You want to remember that some people are quiet and they don't feel comfortable speaking up in a meeting. Maybe you want to get their ideas through another format, but you want to give them a chance to be heard. And when you're listening to them with 2 ears, are you open-minded to processing the idea? And I would offer you that in all the science on the brain, we actually are very closed-minded. We don't really listen to other people's ideas when they're very different from our own. A good analogy to that is a newborn baby. When you have your own baby, how many of you have had your own baby and you're just in the room with a newborn infant a few minutes old? you're just in awe with how perfect this baby is, like the most amazing baby to ever be born, the tiny fingernails and the little eyelashes. But have you ever gone to the hospital to visit somebody else's newborn baby? What does that baby look like? Hair is probably sticking out this way, and the nose is going that way, and the whole head might be cone-shaped, and the fingers look way too long. Of course, we don't tell the parents anything like that. We just say, he looks just like you, right? Right. But we cannot help but see those imperfections because they're there. This child needs a bit of time to outgrow those imperfections. And the same is true of a new idea. Somebody comes to you with a new idea, you cannot help but see what might go wrong or what you don't like about the idea. But if you don't give the idea a chance to develop, if you don't grow the idea with the person by discussing it, it never has a chance to perhaps show its potential. So what are you doing to actually listen to ideas that you don't like from the outset? And to really listen to people, you have to not be distracted. How many of us are going to meetings with our devices? And we've got the phones in the room, and we're either checking emails or we got the phone under the table checking for emails like people don't know what we're doing, right? So we're distracted with the devices. But I want to share with you some of the most recent research on devices and distraction. I'm just pretending this is a phone because mine's far away. Even if you have the phone on the table, you're not paying attention, it's a black screen. You're not looking at the phone, you're in the meeting. Having it on the table is a distraction. You will be less engaged, we will see less firing of brain engagement in the mirror neurons and all the things that mean we're really paying attention to people, even if the phone is on the table. That's how distracting they are. So for real engagement, phones really have to be far away. They have to be in your bag, they have to be off the table, and I'm just so impressed with this room right now. I don't see a single phone on the table. It's like you read my book or something. Right?
We did.
So you want to be thinking about when you're engaging with people, do you actually listen to them? What would it mean to show respect? How, again, what would your standards be for showing respect? So Coach K doesn't impose standards on folks. He does not impose those standards in the least. He says the purpose of standards is to bring out the best in us. And what standards do we want to have as a team to bring out the best in ourselves? So if I were to ask you, and I know some of you are offline, you're sitting remotely by yourselves. Some of you, however, are sitting with your teams. So just a couple of minutes, maybe 2 minutes, of either thinking to yourself, if I had to suggest a standard to my team, this is what I would want it to be. Something that we can aspire to as a team, behaviors that we'd aspire to, that would mean we're all in this together. We are really in this as a group. What would it look like? And so I'll put back the Coach K standards that they happen to come up with. Every team comes up with their own, and ask you just to have 2 minutes of conversation. What would you offer as another possible standard? We're going to mute for 2 minutes, and then I'm going to come back and ask you, what standard did you come up with? What are some of your suggestions?
Volunteer that one.
We got ownership over here.
Was that ownership?
The additional one we got was ownership.
To listen.
Yes.
Feed.
Be engaged in you guys.
Right.
I'm you're one thing. You know what?
Only, not for Derek or Michelle.
Okay.
I got you, Larry.
There's
I don't trust you. They don't trust me, so.
Bless you.
There you go. You say someone's like, oh, you, I don't know. Need a couple of those calls.
Oh, Derek over there.
No, it's Derek.
What? Trust?
Yeah.
Trust me?
No, you're in the video.
Oh, I'm in-
Oh, yeah, you're the top person. It's true.
Am I trying to erase it?
All right, so we're coming back. I'm on. I'm on, right?
We're off mute, yes.
We're off mute. Okay, so let's come back. We had some great conversation here in Irvine, and I'll share a little bit about that with you. And if anybody wants to pipe up from anywhere else, did you come up with something that struck you as a standard that would be a great aspirational endeavor for your team? Might even be a bit of a challenge to do it. It's okay. It's okay if it's hard to try and do it, but what would it be? Anybody from any of the remoter locations want to speak up? I can share with you what we did in the room here. Maybe that will help trigger some thought. Why don't you share what you said about the emails versus face-to-face?
More face-to-face conversation as opposed to communicating, even if a win or a new standard within our day-to-day activities in person as opposed to over email.
Right. Is it possible to get up from your desk and go talk to somebody eye to eye rather than sending them an email? And I want to share with you from a brain perspective why that is actually so important to do, to have the face-to-face communication. And the reason is something in our brains called mirror neurons. And for example, I'm going to do something right now. I hope everybody can see me. So I'm about to move, I'm moving my hand, and what does it appear that I'm about to do? You're anticipating what I'm about to do. You're anticipating I'm about to pick up that cup. But I haven't done it yet, so how do you know? How do you know I'm about to pick up that cup? And the answer is that in your brain, you have something called mirror neurons, meaning you are in your own brain mirroring the activity I'm engaged in. And so the same brain patterns that are directing me to pick up the cup, you're experiencing in your own brain. And that's how we understand one another, because you can see me and we can anticipate each other's reactions. Mirror neurons help us do that. Now, when you're in the room with one another, mirror neurons are firing at their optimum. If you're on a video conference like we are now, you get mirror neuron firing, but not as much. So the folks who are here in the room with me are engaged with me at a different level than the folks who are one step removed. Being on video conference is still better than being on the phone. If you're only on the phone, you have even less mirror neuron firing. And if you're on email, you have the least amount of mirror neuron firing. And that's how so many misunderstandings occur on emails. Somebody sends a message and it's in all caps and you're thinking, why are they yelling at me? Right? And that wasn't their intent at all. It just got stuck, right? So the more you can do to be actually in the same room, and it doesn't have to be always, but to have that engagement, we're in the room once a quarter together. The rest of the time we can be on video conferencing, but the video conferencing will be enhanced by that even once a quarter that we were in the room together. So something to think about. And the second point I wanted to bring up to you is that on the Coach K 2008 Team Gold Standards, they have the we win together and lose together. And in Europe this morning, one of the teams said, you know, in basketball, it's pretty easy to count how you win. It's points. What does it mean for us to win together? And in the conversation with the folks in Europe, what we kind of drew on was purpose. Achieving a compelling purpose is your win. So that purpose is that kind of magnet that draws you into the future. It draws you and helps you think about everything, all your practices that you need to change to better achieve that purpose. So winning for a positive Deviant team is focusing on purpose and achieving that purpose better and better and better, relentlessly improving on trying to achieve your purpose. So with that, I'll leave that again for your team conversations when you have more time. You'll talk about purpose and you'll talk about standards we want to put into place to ensure that we are the team we want to be. Now, how many teams, how many organizations go through an exercise like this? They'll draw up their value list, they'll draw up a standard list, and it becomes a very pretty poster that gets locked in a closet someplace that nobody pays attention to later. 2 weeks later, we forget we even had the conversation, let alone what's on the list. So the second part of the system is that we have to breathe life into these standards. They have to become part of our team DNA. And to do that, we need the next part of our system, which is to celebrate them. So to reinforce the standards, we're going to take a page from the Ritz-Carlton hotel chain. What they do at the Ritz-Carlton is that they have every morning for 10 minutes, every morning, a 10-minute huddle. You use the terminology as well. They have a 10-minute huddle, and in this huddle, they are talking about one of the values of the Ritz-Carlton, but it's all in a very positive, focused way. The idea, so here's just the background. The Ritz-Carlton has 10 values, and around the world, every day, each team talks about the same single value. The next day, they talk about value number 2. Value takes 10 business days to get through the 10 values, and then they keep repeating, rinse, repeat. And so what do they do in their 10-minute huddle around the value? They are sharing stories about people who have been the positive deviant on that value, people who have gone above and beyond living up to that value. And they talk about what the value means to them personally, what they're doing to live up to it, and what's a really good story or example of somebody who has done that. And then the Ritz collects these stories, and they'll put 2 or 3 of those stories on their intranet every morning. The whole world of people working for the Ritz can see what stories were chosen for that value of that day. What's the beauty of this? Everybody at the Ritz is starting the day on the same page, in a very positive way, on the same page with a great story about living up to that value. They also know what value is going to be talked about tomorrow. So what are they thinking about throughout the day at some level? Finding a story, or trying to be the person who will be the story. And so you've got people who are constantly focused on those values rather than it being a list in a closet somewhere. If you think, well, the Ritz-Carlton is a very, touchy-feely, high-touch service industry, I'll share with you that Citigroup, a financial institution, has adopted this methodology. Citigroup in Asia Pacific decided to adopt these morning huddles. And they started in Singapore. It has since been adopted in more than 25 countries. And bankers who are highly analytical sorts, very linear thinkers, at first really resisted. They said, this is stupid. And the CEO of Citigroup in Asia said, if you think it's stupid, you might want to find work elsewhere. So everybody came on board, some very skeptically. And after 2 months, it was quite surprising that the most ardent supporters of doing this were the ones who were the most cynical in the beginning. They suddenly saw that it changed the rhythm of the day. It just made everybody work together better. So Coach K has done this as well with his teams. What does he do? The 2008 basketball team, they would get together during the summer for practices. So all the guys are at a hotel. And he said, we could have just, tumbled out of bed and gotten on the team bus and gone to practice. But then it would be really disjointed. Everybody would kind of be in their own head. So what he did is the first 5 minutes of the practice, before they even got on the bus, they were still in the hotel. They met together in a room before getting on the bus, a 5-minute huddle. And the 5-minute huddle is to talk about one of the standards. Who's lived up to it? Where have you seen it? Who wants to praise somebody else for living up to the standard? Okay? And he credits those 5-minute meetings as being more than likely one of the most important factors in building the team for success. So look at what a small investment of time. We're talking 5 minutes and what that could mean for your team for the next 24 hours. Okay? So just imagine if every team at Logitech was starting the day with the same positive mindset, what that could mean for this company. Now, as I said, this 5-minute huddle is sort of we call it a celebration because we're looking for a positive story. But I would ask you what you currently typically celebrate with your teams. What do you celebrate with your teams? I mean, today we're going to celebrate Logitech's 35-year birthday, but typically, what do we celebrate?
We celebrate
Okay, we celebrate wins, exactly.
Yes.
So what we tend to celebrate are outcomes, right? We tend to celebrate outcomes of projects. We don't do nearly enough to celebrate the process of getting there. We don't celebrate the people and the effort of getting there. And it turns out that people need to feel a sense of progress. We have something in psychology called the progress principle. And if you're only celebrating something that's going to be 2 years from now happening, and I got to wait 2 years to celebrate something, that's way too far into the future. I don't feel a weekly sense of daily, of month, some progress that makes me want to consistently bring that tough effort to my work. So we've got to be celebrating more frequently, and we have to be celebrating the behaviors we want to see happening. So we got to be thinking about how to celebrate process. Zappos is an example of a company that took this progress principle to heart. So I'll give you the Zappos example. Zappos, when they started, right, the online shoe selling company, they had a 3-year, I call it like an initiation, or it took 3 years from point of hiring to get the title of the VP of shoes. And people felt that 3 years took forever. And yeah, it did, because they had an 18-month promotion and then the next 18-month promotion. And 18 months is really forever in the world we live in. So Zappos changed one thing. They didn't change the 3-year. They changed the frequency of promotions. Now people are promoted every 6 months. They have little micro promotions. Every 6 months you get promoted instead of you have to waiting 18 months to do so. And in so doing, people can feel like progress is being made. I can see out 6 months from now that something's going to happen and I'm going to get appreciated for it. So you have to ask yourself, what do people appreciate? Here's what you don't want to do. I was working with a defense company right here in Southern California. They build military equipment, and the executive vice president of the sector said, you know what, we don't show appreciation frequently enough. We don't say thank you enough to people. So here's what he mandated. He sent out a missive to all of his direct reports telling them that every Friday at 5 o'clock, they have to send out an email to every single employee has to get this email at the same time, 5 p.m. on Friday, that says the following. Dear team member. Yeah. Dear team member, we want you to know how much we appreciate your contribution to the efforts of this organization. Thank you. Yeah. Generic, impersonal, 5 p.m. everybody, every week the same thing. You know that's coming into your inbox every Friday at 5 o'clock. How appreciated do you feel? It's like tick off the box. Okay, I did the appreciation thing, right? So appreciation takes some effort on your part to think what's spontaneous and personal and appropriate. It's got to be culturally appropriate too. It does take effort to think about it. And it gets stale. It can't be the same thing over and over again. And so that's why, really? Yes, you have to put the effort into it. How do we show appreciation to one another? So that's a question I'm going to have for you as well. How do you celebrate people and process, not just outcome? Think about that as a team. What are you going to do? Now, to motivate behavioral change does require that we celebrate the behavioral changes we're looking for. But how do you find and share change that you want people to make? And that's where we're now going to focus much more deeply on what it means to be a positive deviant and how you can use positive deviance from the organization to forge a more extraordinary team. So let's look at what is a positive deviant in an organization. You may have in the company a challenge, an issue, a problem, and you may even feel that the organization is failing in some way on some attribute. However, if you were to look case by case, team by team, geography by geography, you might find what we call positive deviance, namely people with the same access to exactly the same resources as everybody else, but who deviate from them in some positive way. They're able to create value on this challenge that others are not. And so positive deviance is really a focus on where the problem isn't. Can we go and find where the problem does not exist and amplify that? What's going right, not what's going wrong. And if you watch the behaviors of people who are getting it right, that can become the model of transformation for the rest of the organization. Now, I want to just share with you the history of this positive deviant concept, since we've had so many of these workshops on it. Now I'm coming all the way to the end. Where did the concept come from? A group got formed following the Vietnam War, and they called themselves Save the Children. It was clear that children in Vietnam had suffered tremendously from the war, and so many were suffering from malnutrition. Many children were dying because of malnutrition. And Save the Children was going to go into Vietnam to save the children. Now, one option would be to just have massive airlifts of food and bring food into the country. But that wouldn't be sustainable. And it's not clear that the villagers in these suffering communities would even accept that food. Maybe it's not food they would even eat. So what this group did is they went into their first village, and they went in to see, are there any children who defy the known problem of malnutrition? Are there any kids here who are doing a little bit better than all the other kids in the village? And they found a family. They found a family where the kids, they were malnourished, but not to the extent of damage. And then, okay, what's this family doing differently? And what they looked at and found was that those parents would go down to the rice paddies and collect the food, but that family wasn't washing the rice. All the other families would wash the rice. This family did not wash the rice. And by not washing the rice, there was just enough protein from bugs and just enough vitamins from weeds and some greens that were in the rice to keep these kids alive. And so those parents could now become trainers of transformation for the rest of the community. It wasn't Save the Children coming in and saying, don't wash the rice, because the other families would have said, oh, no, we have to wash the rice. You've already got families in the community not washing rice, which means it must be safe. And then the other people are much more willing to accept the solution because it comes from within. They then went to the next village, and they didn't try to impose the other village's solution. They looked in that village to find the solution. And in this village, they found something else. They found that the kids who were thriving were getting the same meager portion of rice, but in the starving kids were getting it all in one meal. And starving kids can't digest food as well as somebody who's doing okay. So the kids who were surviving were actually getting the same small 2 tablespoons of rice per day, but it was being doled out a quarter of a teaspoon every few hours, as opposed to 1 meal a day. And they became the model of transformation for that village, and on it went. Within 2 years, 80% of the kids in Vietnam were no longer malnourished, and the solution came from within. So again, the whole idea of positive deviance is to try to find where the problem isn't and amplify it from there. How do we take that and bring it into a high-tech company? Well, there was a director of HR who did it in a very high-tech technology firm. And when she came on board as the head of HR in the late 1980s, early 90s, she was appalled at what she saw. The entire company was white males. And she said, this is wrong. And this is not, the hiring statistics are just appalling. And she would talk to the managers and say, what's going on here? And they would say, well, we can't find women who are qualified. We can't find minorities who are qualified. So we have to hire who's qualified. She could start fighting them, or she could look for positive deviance. So she looked throughout this entire organization, which was large, several thousand people, to see if she could find any of the managers who were hiring a better percentage of women and minorities, and she found a few. And what she did is she amplified their behavior by rewarding them. Any perk she had went to them. Any way she could broadcast what they were doing, highlight their products. If there was a conference to go to, they get to go to the conference. And other managers are watching and thinking, why all the attention on that? What's going on here? Why? Oh. And within just a few months, behavior started to change. Within a couple of years, she now had a much higher number of women, qualified women were suddenly found. Qualified minorities, were suddenly discovered. So she amplified the positive instead of just focusing on the negative. It's a very different change model. So how do we celebrate positive deviance? The traditional model of change says, we have a problem. Let's see if we have some experts who can help us fix it. Let them come with their outside solutions and tell us what to do. And when solutions come from the outside, it's like a virus. You know, if you have a virus invading your body, there's going to be a lot of antibodies and a lot of resistance, and people are going to fight that new idea. The positive deviance says there's a lot of wisdom already inside. Let's go looking for it. Let's at least start there and see if we can find wisdom from within. And if we can find the wisdom from within, the success is already here. They become the model of transformation. That virus is already internal to the organization. You don't get the same kind of antibody resistance. People are much more willing to accept that as a plausible and possible solution. So the question I have for you, all of you folks as teams, is what would it take for you to become a positive deviant team at Logitech, where people would look at you as the team to emulate? What would be so special about you that would be different from all other teams? And the same goes for you as an individual contributor to your team. What is unique about you that you could bring to the team that would make you the positive deviant? And I'll give you one example from my own history about how I turned myself into a positive deviant at UCLA, my university. I teach the undergraduates in psychology, and our classes are 350 students large. It's quite it's like a small battle. You know, I have teaching assistants, 20 of them, and it's really hard to give individual attention to 350 students, which means the prevailing behavior from professors is if a student sends an email, they're lucky to ever get a response. Or if they get a response, it's 3 weeks later. And so I make a commitment to my students. On the first day of class, I tell the class, if you send an email to me during the term we're together and you put our class name in the subject line, I guarantee you a response within 24 hours. It's usually going to be sooner than that, but it's going to be 24 hours. And you hear the whole class go, really? Unheard of. Now, how can I make that commitment? Well, because for me, that behavior is not difficult. I like to clear out the inbox by the end of the day. I don't want things hanging over for 3 weeks. So it's something I'm doing already that's different from everybody else, and I've identified it as a way to create value that is unique to what works for me. And so that's what you want to be thinking about, is what is the behavior that you could bring, the value you bring that is already defines who you are, that would add value to the team, that is the positive deviant, that can create multiple layers of positive deviance on the team if we're all doing this. Okay? So what's the one small thing you could do, and what's the one small thing your team could commit to Logitech that would turn the team into the positive deviant? Now, we're not done yet. There's still one more part to our puzzle, one more part to our framework. Can I answer every email in 24 hours? Will I ever slip up on this? Yeah, I could be in Europe on a plane, I could have jet lag, I could be ill, and I don't answer within 24 hours. Sometimes 2 days will go by and oops, I made a mistake. I didn't respond in 24 hours. I don't want that to become the new standard. So the third part of the system is that when we slip up on our standards, we have to acknowledge that we've slipped up and correct, right? So part of a robust system is to acknowledge there are going to be setbacks and then do something about them so that that doesn't become the new standard, okay? Meaning we have to have a failure protocol, because you are going to fail. Stuff is going to happen you didn't intend. It was something surprised you about how the future unfolded. And the reality is, when you fail, not if, when you fail, that will say more about you than all of your successes combined, because people are watching. And it is not the failure that determines who you are as a team, it's your response to that failure that really determines your future. As a strong example of that, Lexus. Lexus is a car company that started with the tagline, the relentless pursuit of perfection. That's going to be a high bar to live up to, right? You got perfection in your title. And they had been in business for exactly 3 weeks in the United States. They had sold 8,000 cars, and a faulty part was found. The late night comedians, the Johnny Carsons, made so much fun of this. Like, the relentless pursuit of perfection, 8,000 cars are already dying on the road. Where are they going from here? How much more perfect can they get, right? And so Lexus, the response Lexus gave to this discovery was what actually determined their future. Lexus said, we're not going to question which cars have the faulty part. Are there cars that don't have the faulty part? They directed every one of their dealerships to contact the customer who bought the car and come to them with a replacement. The customer's not going to be inconvenienced. You go to their house, you leave them a replacement car, and you pick up the car. We're going to replace every part in all 8,000 cars, no questions asked. We don't want a customer to doubt, does my car have a problem or not? So they're going to change every single part. You got to do it within 2 weeks, and you're going to return the car to the customer with a full tank of gas and washed. Clean and with a full tank of gas. No inconvenience to the customer whatsoever. What did that do to the customer perception of Lexus as a customer-centric organization? It actually elevated it, right? They leveraged this failure as an opportunity to show people, we're going to take care of you no matter what. If something goes wrong, it's on us, it's not on you. So they actually enhanced their reputation. You want to then think you're not finished when you fail. Something goes wrong, that's not the end of you. It is your response to that failure that will determine the future of your reputation. And in fact, what that requires though from you is resilience. And resilience means we don't fall apart when things go wrong. We have the mental and emotional stamina to take care of things and stick together as a team to make sure things are done in the fulfillment of our purpose. In fact, Winston Churchill said that real success is the ability to go from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm, right? So the question is, how can we stay enthusiastic? And to that end, I want to show you a picture. Okay, so what is this kid feeling?
Fear.
He's so afraid, right? The last thing he wants to do is let go of that dog and bored. All right, so this is a Norman Rockwell painting, which means it's a really expensive painting. And I was pretty surprised to learn who owns the original of this painting. I was watching the Sunday morning show, and Sunday morning on Sunday morning, and Steven Spielberg owns the original of this. They were interviewing Spielberg in his office, and this picture is hanging right in front of his desk. So they asked him, "That's so odd. Why do you have that painting?" And he said, "Well, that's exactly how I feel every time I start a new project. And I have to remind myself that I can work through those feelings." And I thought, oh, we are all in so much trouble. Because if that's how Spielberg, who is so incredibly successful, decades of success, if that's how he feels, even today when he's starting a new project, how do the rest of us feel when we're pushed to try something new, when we've got a new launch, when new software, stuff that we haven't tried before? We're going to feel like that kid on the diving board. That's the default emotion, is fear. And it's not fear of brilliance, and it's not fear of success, right? It's the fear of not measuring up, the fear of failing. So on our teams, what we have to create is a psychological safety. How do we create psychological safety on our teams? That if I, as a team member, fail, I've got the support of the rest of the team to pick me back up. Do I have that? Because if we're not making that clear, on the Coach K standards, it was we win together and we lose together, meaning You blew a basket, it's not you, it's the whole team. We did it. Somehow we weren't in it with each other to support each other to make that basket. And so I'm going to share with you the story of a different Olympic athlete, since we're on the Olympic theme today, who really changed my view of failure and how I look at failure in my own life. And if we could bring her story into our team, something magical could happen. The athlete in question, her name is Bonnie St. John. And I went to a lecture she gave. Bonnie was a participant in the 1984 Winter Olympics. Her sport is downhill ski racing. And in this sport, you go down two different sides of the mountain, and whoever has the fastest combined time gets the gold medal. Now, what makes Bonnie's story so incredibly heartwarming is that when Bonnie was 5 years old, she had to have her right leg amputated. Small child now with one leg and a prosthetic leg. When she was 6, she was watching the Winter Olympics and she saw people skiing and she got really excited and she told her mom, I want to learn how to ski. We already have a challenge. To make it harder, Bonnie was growing up in San Diego, California. Okay? There is hardly snow in the backyard to be learning how to ski, so that's a problem. And to triple the difficulty, right, we have a prosthetic leg, we have no snow. Her mother is a single parent who can barely make ends meet. There is no discretionary income for winter camps. But Bonnie is one of those types who the word no is not in her vocabulary. She's going to learn how to ski. And she got so good. She qualified to represent the United States in the Paralympics. And that's the story I want to share with you. The story starts at the top of the mountain. There are 12 competitors, and they've all been working for this their whole life. They all want the gold medal. They all want success. And after the first run down the first side of the mountain, Bonnie's in first place. She has the fastest time. And because she's in first place, on the other side of the mountain, she gets to go last. Why is that good? Why is it good to go last?
Well, you gotta beat.
Yes, you can know what you have to beat. And you can learn from other people's mistakes. So she has an earpiece, and her coach is feeding her information. I hope it's one of your earpieces, right? She has an earpiece.
That's what we were thinking.
Yeah. This is 84, right? She's feeding, and so he's feeding her information. And what she's learning is that everybody's falling. And they're falling in the same two spots. There is some very slick ice, and a little later, there's a sharp curve. And he's telling her what to do differently. He's coaching her out of those problems. So she starts down the mountain knowing exactly where the issues are, and she got to the ice. That problem was already solved for her. She was still up. And then she got to the curve. That too was a known problem, and so she could sail past that one as well. She was now 300 yards from the finish line. And what happened to Bonnie?
Crash.
Yep. She fell. She crashed. She fell down where no one else had fallen. And she says the shock and the anguish of that moment is impossible to put into words. The completely unexpected crash. But something in all that Olympic training forces these athletes, every single one of them, to just get up and power through the finish line one way or another. And Bonnie ended up with the bronze medal, not the gold. And she said, what did I learn that day? I learned it's not if you're going to fall, it's when. Every one of us is going to fall. Winners get back up. Gold medal winners just get up a little faster. And I thought, wow, what attitude that takes, doesn't it? To get up a little faster means you somehow have the mental and the emotional wherewithal that you have prepared in advance, so that when it happens, you are ready to get up just a little faster. And that's the psychological safety I'm talking about. If we haven't figured out as a team what happens when we fall, we're not ready for it when it happens. So how do we do that as a team? I'll share with you one possibility, one strategy that is just a suggestion. You can think of other things you might want to do. But what I've seen on a global organization called CEMEX, they have teams all over the world in over 60 countries. When their teams get together for their weekly meeting, there's one question every team around the world has to answer. And we go around the room and each person has to answer this question. And the question is, what did I learn last week that's going to help me be better next week? That's it. What did I learn last week that will help me be better next week? The question implies you can get better. It means we don't expect you to be perfect. We're looking for you to learn. And who in the room has to answer the question first? The leader. If the CEO has come for a visit, CEO goes first. And the leader of the team cannot say, okay, what I learned last week is that all of you are idiots, right? It has to be personal vulnerability. Why? Why does the leader have to be personally vulnerable? Because it creates trust on the team. If a leader is willing to show that they're not perfect, it means I trust you, I'm your leader, and I trust you with my vulnerability. Now the team will trust you back. This is how we build trust, by trusting one another. So we go around the room and each person just talks about something that didn't go quite as expected. What did I learn from that? What can I do better next week? Help me. I don't know what to do better next week. I need the team to help and support me get better. So this is what CEMEX does, and that's a strategy that I've seen teams use quite nicely and effectively. We'll see where you take it. How do you create psychological safety? Now, let's come back to Coach K and the 2008 team. Good news. Yes, they won the gold medal. All that effort paid off and they got the gold medal. But what happened at the medal ceremony was, I think, more powerful than even getting the gold medal. It turns out that on teams, each athlete gets a medal. The coach gets nothing. Spontaneously, I want to show you what these athletes did. They just took the medal off their necks and every one of them put their medal on Coach K. And I thought it was such a defining moment, showing that this team had truly achieved that spirit of a single heart and a single mind, as symbolized by this coach that had brought them together. And Coach K agreed to do it again. He said, we did it in 2008. I will work with the next crop of athletes for 2012. And started from scratch, started with the standards, where those athletes came up with their standards, different from the 2019. What do standards mean to them? And celebrating and huddling and acknowledging and correcting. And in 2012, they came back with the gold medal. He agreed to do it one final time. He coached the 2016 team a few weeks ago, Summer Olympics, gold medal. Does it mean we will always win the gold medal? No, it means we have a system in place that makes it much more likely that we can be successful, but we have a system in place that also means should we falter, we can much more quickly get back up so that 4 years later, we know we have a chance again. So my question to you, my question to Logitech teams is, how could you use this framework that is so successful for a basketball team to bring that into your own team and create your own legacy? How do you take great people? You have wonderful people on your teams. You've got stars, you've hired fantastic talent, people with skill sets. But how can you talk about purpose? What will your purpose be? What will the standards of collaboration look like? How can you celebrate the process and the people of getting to outcomes? And then how do you create psychological safety so that even when we falter, even when we're surprised by things we didn't anticipate, we can just get right back up and, as Winston Churchill said, move with enthusiasm to the next level. So that is my challenge to you. With that, I send you out there now to become those positive deviant teams that you can be so proud of. Thank you.